this stalemate reversed?
Mr. Chairman, I have adequate resourcing in my counterterrorism mission. In my train, advise, and assist mission, however, we have a shortfall of a few thousand. And this is in the NATO train, advise, assist mission. So this can come from the U.S. and its allies.
It's of concern, shouldn't it be, to all of us that you now have Russia, Iran, and Al-Qaeda now playing significant roles, some one more than the other, but that wasn't the case a couple of years ago, was it?
Mr. Chairman, I agree. There have been an increase in external actors interfering in the Afghan attainment of peace and stability.
And the Russian involvement?
The Russian involvement this year has become more difficult. First, they have begun to publicly legitimize the Taliban. This narrative that they promote is that the Taliban are fighting Islamic State and the Afghan government is not fighting Islamic State, and that therefore there could be a spillover of this group into the region. This is a false narrative. The Afghan government, along with U.S. counterterrorism forces, are successfully fighting against Islamic State in Afghanistan. In this year alone, we have reduced their fighters by half, their territory by 2/3. We've killed their leader, in fact, their top 12 leaders, and continue to disrupt their operations.
And what's your view of what we need to do concerning the safe haven issue in Pakistan?
Sir, it's very difficult to succeed on the battlefield when your enemy enjoys external support and safe haven. I think we need to continue to work closely with Pakistan.
And they did some good work in North Waziristan, right?
They did, sir, and we have great respect for the operation they conducted in Waziristan. It was a very large and significant operation, and they suffered heavy casualties.
But the problem is the Haqqani network, especially in places like Quetta?
Sir, that's correct. We still have enemy sanctuary in areas like Quetta, as you mentioned, with the Taliban leadership, and other cities within the tribal areas for the Haqqani leadership.
And recently, have your rules of engagement been to the point where you have a greater ability to combat the enemy?
So the rules of engagement I gained in June were instrumental to our success this year. They clearly helped us throughout the year. These rules of engagement or authorities involve the use of U.S. combat enablers, most notably air power, in support of Afghan security forces and their campaign.
As you pointed out in your opening statement, the Afghans want to fight for themselves,
Absolutely.
Right? They don't want us to go in and fight for them.
Right.
And so, but if they're going to be effective, they need the kind of assistance and capability, including, you might mention, air capability that we're now training them for. For example, I'm proud that many of them are training in F-16s in Tucson, Arizona. But isn't their air capability an important component of their capability of assuming the responsibilities from us?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. If I may elaborate on that just a little bit. Offensive capability is what will break the stalemate in Afghanistan. The key offensive capabilities in the Afghan security forces are their special forces and their air force. This investment, which we are requesting in the Afghan Air Force, will help them, as you mentioned, to take over responsibility for their own close air support. And even more importantly, this then will lead to an offensive capability that allows them to overmatch the Taliban or any other group on the battlefield anywhere around the country.
And it might be nice if they could come to the United States to train.
Yes, sir, and they look forward to this.
Which they are not allowed to do at the moment. Senator Reid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, General, again for your service. And please relay our thanks and gratitude to the men and women that you lead.
I will, Senator.
Not only U.S. forces, but NATO forces.
Thank you, sir.
You have stated that your counterterrorism platform, both personnel and equipment, is more than adequate for the task. Is that your view?
That's correct, Senator. We have adequate resources. And I would add, when we need to do additional operations, we can surge assets into the country, and this is why it's adequate. General Votel and General Thomas from Central Command and Special Operations Command have the ability to move assets in coordination with the department, And so this has proven to be a successful tactic.
Very good. So the need for more manpower is on the train, advise, and assist area.
Yes, sir.
At this juncture, you are operating at the corps level?
That's correct, Senator.
Some exceptions? Are there any exceptions?
Senator, in the last summer, since we gained the new authorities in June, we began developing what we called expeditionary advising packages, which we would push down below the corps level. Now, this was something we put together based on the authorities and approved quite successful last year. But we would like to be able to advise below the corps level. This is something that NATO has agreed to in our guidance. It's strictly a question of manning at this point.
So that you would be able to essentially have more of these teams below the corps level?
Yes, sir.
At battalion level, but not down at the individual company platoon level, certainly.
Sir, it would most likely be at the brigade level, but
Brigade
we
level.
think that would be adequate for what we need to do.
And our NATO allies are prepared to help out, too, in terms of bulking up these forces?
Sir, I'd use as an example, our German allies developed an expeditionary advising package that they placed in Kunduz last year. This was a great help. Our Italian allies in the West are looking at something similar. But we've been able to integrate U.S. expeditionary advising packages around the country as required in a seamless manner.
Both the chairman, myself, and you in your opening statements have commented on the criticality of dealing with Pakistan, and it is a very complicated situation. As you pointed out, they have conducted very serious and very credible operations. They've sustained casualties, but on the other hand, they seem at times, particularly ISI, their intelligence service, to be aiding and assisting Haqqani Network and others. You have had some dealings with the new chief of staff in the Army. I don't know if you have any dealings with the new head of ISI, but does it make sense to focus our persuasive efforts on not the overall country, but on specific sub-elements within Pakistan?
Sir, I have great respect for the Pakistan military and its leaders. I'm developing I believe, a positive and constructive relationship with General Bajwa and his team. And again, we have great respect for the operations they've conducted in the Fatah. As both you and the chairman have mentioned, the Pakistan people have also suffered from the scourge of terrorism. And I quite sincerely want to eliminate those terrorists that are attacking their society. If I may, I'd like to highlight one example. This year, U.S. counterterrorism efforts killed someone named Omar Khalifa. Omar Khalifa was the head of the Tareki Gidar group who perpetuated the horrendous attack on the Peshawar Army School. This was the attack which killed over 130 children in Peshawar, and was the 2-year commemoration occurred in December. So this is an example of how the United States is working with Pakistan against our common enemies. We also, in a raid this year in eastern Afghanistan, liberated the son of the former Pakistani Prime Minister. His name was Haider Gilani, and returned him to his family in Pakistan. So I highlight these as examples of how the U.S. is working with Pakistan against common enemies. But we need to improve in the areas that you mentioned. We need to improve the pressure applied on the Haqqanis and the Taliban on the Pakistan side of the border.
Again, General, thank you for your service, and continue to look forward to your continued service. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Reinhardt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mentioned 3 things when you were generous enough to come to the office, and we have a nice visit. And I want to just 2 of the things have been really responded to, and so I won't bring them up. One was, of course, the fact that the Afghan Security Force district that they controlled has gone down to 57% from the 72%, which you did respond to in the chairman's questions. The second thing, which you pretty much answered, is the talking about the troop levels. Except, as it is right now, we have about 8,500 of our guys over there.
Yes, sir.
And about 12,500 total.
Yes, sir.
And when you said a minute ago that the shortfall is a few thousand, is that we need to correct in order to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish right now? When you say a few thousand, would that be referring to ours or to the total allies and the total figure?
Sir, this is in the area of the Train, Advise, Assist mission, which is a NATO mission. So these contributions could come from our allies as well as the United States. We have identified the requirement and the desire to advise below the core level. So these additional forces would enable us to thicken our advisory effort across the Afghan ministries and do more advising below the core level. So this is an area that I am currently in discussion with my chain of command, with General Votel, General Scaparrotti, Chairman Dunford, Secretary Mattis. And I know that in the coming weeks, when Secretary Mattis has a chance to attend the defense ministerials next week and consult with allies and visit the theater, then we're going to be able to discuss this in greater detail.
Okay, that clarification is good. I think it's necessary because the media will be covering this. We want to make sure they know what we're talking about here.
Thank you, sir.
Now, the main thing I wanted to cover, and it's one that is, we have these meetings. We have private meetings with you and all the great people that we're depending on, and I'm very proud of all of you and what is going. We have that opportunity. You also have the opportunity to consult with us because we have a little closer contact with the people out there who are paying for all this stuff.
Yes, sir.
And one of the problems that we have is even in my state of Oklahoma, I'll go back and they'll talk about, all right, we've been there 15 years now, we've been doing this.
Yes, sir.
Why is it worth all of that? The strongest thing that I can say is something I honestly believe in my heart, and that is if we don't do it over there, it's going to be done in the homeland. You addressed this in your written statement. When you said your predecessor, General Campbell, said if we don't stay engaged here to build the Afghans' capacity to fight this threat, keep the sanctuary down, it's coming back to our homeland. Then you re-emphasized that in your opening statement. Now, what I'd like to do is, I think it's worth getting into the record here as to how this might affect something on our homeland. We understand this. We've gotten a lot of things in confidential briefings, but I think it's very important for the country to know that. Any comments you can make on any specifics? I know that when you had the death of that they had actually had plans for an attack on the mainland. Can you comment on that?
Yes, Senator, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to articulate this. We believe, as we said, that our operations in Afghanistan directly protect the homeland. The individual you're referring to is named Farouk al-Qatari.
Yes,
yes, sir. We killed him on October the 23rd in eastern Afghanistan in a remote area of Kunar province. Farouk al-Qatari was the external operations director for al-Qaeda. He was involved in plotting against the U.S. homeland. So this is one example, without getting into classified details, of a specific terrorist operating in Afghanistan who was involved in plotting against the U.S. homeland. More importantly, his organization, al-Qaeda, and its affiliates have been severely attrited and degraded, as you know, and our objective is to destroy them in Afghanistan. We will continue to keep pressure, but in order to do that, we need to maintain the counterterrorism platform that we have in Afghanistan in an enduring manner. So this is how it directly relates to our national security at home. I would also add, Senator, if I may, that from a height of our engagement in Afghanistan over the past 15 years, we were over 100,000 troops. We are now down to about 10% of that. So as we look at this commitment over time, that surge that we did into Afghanistan will enable us to build the Afghan security forces, and as the chairman mentioned, now it is they who are doing most of the fighting. From the height of our assistance to the Afghan security forces was 10 to 12 billion in those years that we were building. We're now down to about 3.5 billion for the Afghan security forces fund with additional funds to support our troops. So there has been a reduction in the overall cost of this mission.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. My time has expired, but it's the homeland connection that we need to be armed with. You've done a very good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, General Nicholson. Thank you for taking command of our mission in Afghanistan, and thank you for meeting with me earlier this week. I appreciate the generosity of your time. We officially ended our combat mission in Afghanistan at the end of 2014, but obviously we still maintain a substantial presence there. And one of our primary objectives in Afghanistan is to help build and sustain the capacity of the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces to secure their own country, as you've discussed. And that includes paying salaries for Afghan personnel. Now, I understand why this kind of support is powerfully important when you're trying to build a local force, but in a report issued last month identifying the greatest threats to the success of our mission, the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction repeated the nagging problem of salaries being paid to non-existent or so-called ghost soldiers and ghost police officers. To succeed, I understand that the Afghan forces must be trained and capable, but above all, they must be fully manned. There must actually be people there. And although they're authorized at 352,000, reports have estimated that there are still tens of thousands of those ghost personnel who are getting salaries and included in those numbers. So that means the strength of the Afghan forces must be substantially less. It's dangerous for our troops, obviously, damaging to the missions. It's also just plain old corruption, and the American taxpayers are footing the bill. General, I know that you recently identified corruption as a serious problem that you wanted to tackle, one of the biggest challenges facing the Afghan security forces. And so I wondered, could you just speak to the question of how we're helping the Afghan Ministries of Defense and Interior develop a fully operational system to help eliminate this problem?
Thank you, Senator, for highlighting this issue. And it is a critical issue. In fact, as we looked at the high casualty rates last year, the principal causes that we identified were, number one, failures in leadership on the battlefield. The second was corruption, as you've highlighted. So the corruption primarily has occurred in the pay system and the personnel system, as you've highlighted, ma'am, and also in the supply system. The third factor of high casualties was tactics, and primarily the reduction of the checkpoints out there, the isolated checkpoints that become more vulnerable to attack. So back to the point of corruption, how to improve this. And this is where in my opening statement I commented on President Ghani's courage in going after this. So we have done a number of things. On the specific issue of ghost soldiers, you're correct. We believe there are some tens of thousands fewer soldiers in the field than have been reported. And we work closely with the CGAR on this going forward and with the government of Afghanistan. So specifically this year, in response to this problem, we have issued a letter to the Afghan government advising them that we are withholding the funding for those soldiers who we cannot biometrically account for. So the biometric enrollment of soldiers creates an identity in the system that is hard to fake, basically. Whereas previously, we paid based upon the number that they stated that they had. So the biometric enrollment is ongoing, and we look to have that complete in the next 4 to 5 months. And but then we will give them the money for those soldiers who are actually biometrically enrolled. We've additionally asked for capabilities to better follow our money through the Afghan ministries, to follow the money, ensure it's not being inappropriately diverted, so we can be good stewards of our taxpayer resources.
Good. Thank you very much, General. You know, we've been in Afghanistan for 15 years. We've spent $117 billion in American taxpayer funds. And according to the Special Inspector General, we're spending $13 million every day to be in Afghanistan. $13 million. More than 2,000 American service members have made the ultimate sacrifice there. More than 8,400 American service members are there today, along with thousands of diplomatic personnel and contractors. Our military and it cannot and should not be in Afghanistan forever. Our end goal must be to help Afghanistan build a self-sustaining force that's capable of securing the country so our U.S. troops can come home. And I appreciate your work in this direction. Thank you, General.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, General, for your service, and thank you for the service of those that you command. It is appreciated by everyone in this country. When you and I had our conversation in my office, we talked about possible additional capabilities that you would need. And we specifically kind of focused in on the contractors that are in Afghanistan now. Could you talk about the consequences of the so-called boots on the ground limitation that we're looking at, particularly with respect to the reliance that we have on contractors?
Thank you, Senator, for raising that issue, and it has two implications. Of course, it has an implication for us on the ground in Afghanistan, but also for overall readiness of our armed services, which I know is of a great concern to this committee. So specifically, as the force manning levels have taken effect, what we have done in some cases is substitute contractors for soldiers in order to meet the force manning levels. I'll give you an example of that in the case of our aviation brigade. So we have the Combat Aviation Brigade of the 1st Infantry Division from Fort Riley, Kansas, is in Afghanistan. They deployed with their helicopters and their pilots and their staffs, but because of our troop limitations, we left their mechanics back in Fort Riley and substituted contract mechanics. And this was in order to optimize the amount of actual uniformed soldiers we were allowed. This contract for maintenance runs into the tens of millions of dollars, and then the soldiers who are trained to be mechanics are sitting back at Fort Riley not having the opportunity to do their job. So this has a direct impact on Army readiness, and it also costs us more money. So as we have begun these discussions with the administration and with Secretary Mattis, this is one of the issues that we have put on the table, is how to optimize readiness and our performance in the battlefield by managing by objective and not by force manning level. Currently with contractors, we have roughly a 2-to-1 ratio of contractors to soldiers, and if we look at the deploying whole units instead of portions of units, then this would enable us to reduce our contractor load somewhat, and it would be better for Army and service readiness.
I would imagine you're going to raise those concerns about and ask for more flexibility then from these limitations when you are able to have those discussions?
Yes, Senator.
You spoke about the increasing Russian involvement in Afghanistan and that growing relationship that they're having with the Taliban. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more for us, please?
Yes, ma'am. So in addition to the public legitimizing of the Taliban, which is surprising given the Taliban have evolved over the years into a narco-insurgency and one that engages in extensive criminal activity, narcotics, kidnapping, illegal mining, and other forms of criminal activity to fund their operations. Russia has legitimized them with this false narrative of fighting ISIL-K. They also have initiated a series of meetings in Moscow to which the Afghans have not been invited for the first several meetings in which to discuss the future of Afghanistan. Afghanistan is trying to work with all of its neighbors and all the stakeholders. They've reached out to the Russians about this, and we believe that a peace and reconciliation process in Afghanistan should be Afghan-led. And this has been the position of the United States government, and these are we believe this will be the most lasting, enduring, effective peace arrangement. So ultimately, where we're trying to go and help the Afghans go is to get to a point where they reconcile with the belligerents, end this long war that they've experienced, and be able to move forward with a peaceful and prosperous country.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Mr.
Senator.
Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and General. Wonderful to have you here, and appreciate the time that we had yesterday in my office as well, talking about a number of these issues. During this hearing, a number of folks have referenced the Inspector General's report about what's been happening in Afghanistan, and I want to just highlight some of those findings that I find particularly striking and then ask a question. But as others have mentioned, since 2001, 2,247 U.S. military personnel have died, 20,000 have been wounded, Adjusted for inflation, the U.S. has spent more on Afghanistan's reconstruction than it did on the Marshall Plan to rebuild Western Europe after World War II. Reconstructing Afghanistan has now become the largest expenditure to rebuild a single country in our nation's history. The Afghan security forces are not capable of providing security for the whole country. The Afghan government cannot sustain many of the investments that the U.S. taxpayers have made in the country. And despite a U.S. investment of $8.5 billion in counter-narcotics, Afghan opium production is now at an all-time high. Despite $70 billion in U.S. investment in Afghan security forces, only 63% of the country is under government control. Corruption continues to erode legitimacy, limiting effectiveness, bolstering support for the opposing insurgency. And after 15 years, Afghanistan still cannot support itself financially or functionally, and long-term financial assistance will be required if the country is to survive. Not a good record after 15 years of involvement in Afghanistan, and after what I've heard today and what we talked about yesterday, it's becoming even more complicated with the Russian involvement, Chinese involvement in natural resources, and the list goes on. If you could just say and what I've heard is a lot of what I've heard over the last 15 years of what the United States will be doing in Afghanistan. What are we going to do that's different, that has not been done in 15 years, given this, I think, pretty damaging report about what's happened over the last 15 years?
Thank you, Senator, and I appreciate the reviewing this and the chance to talk about President Ghani's plan for the way ahead. So one of the, and I acknowledge and again express our appreciation for the great support from this body to sustain this effort. Our number one objective has been to protect the homeland, and we have not had another attack on the homeland from Afghanistan in the 15 years that we have been there. So I'd say that's point number one. As I mentioned before, so I acknowledge fully the significant sunk cost that we have made in Afghanistan. I would mention that we now are at about 10% of what we once were in terms of troop commitment, and have reduced those other expenditures significantly. Yes, the problems persist, and I don't want to in any way minimize those. What we have with President Ghani is a partner who is willing to boldly go after these problems, and this is significant. And I offered the example of the ghost soldiers. This was something that he was willing to do that previously we had not been able to do. I also want to share the plans we are working with the Afghan government, which President Ghani calls the ANDSF roadmap, 4-year roadmap. After the Warsaw Summit this summer in July of 16, when the Allies granted 4 more years of commitment to Afghanistan, President Ghani sat down with his team and us to say, how are we going to achieve success in the next 4 years? We're working on that plan now. This plan involves expanding the amount of control that the government has over the population. I should point out that this investment that we have made has resulted in a Afghan population who universally, well, almost universally, 87% reject the Taliban. They do not want to return to the Taliban. 3/4 of the population have great confidence in their security forces. So this is a population and a government who want to work with us and need our support. Geostrategically, it's a critically important region of the world. This is a tough neighborhood. Iran, Pakistan, China, Central Asia. Once removed, you have other conflict zones. We have a partner in Afghanistan, a moderate Islamic republic that wants to partner with us against terrorism. We have a population who reject terrorism, and we have an ability to have a counterterrorism platform in a critically important part of the world. So success going forward, we believe, means helping the Afghans to achieve this greater population control. That then will enable us to have the enduring counterterrorism platform to help to continue to protect our homeland and those of our allies. We also see if we can get to a place of reconciliation, that we then bring a degree of stability to this critical region that will benefit the entire neighborhood, to include India, China, everyone. So in my initial conversations with my new chain of command, we have touched upon all of these areas. So your concerns and the concerns of this committee are at the top of the list as we discuss this going forward on how we can achieve success in Afghanistan going forward to protect our national interests along the lines I just outlined.
Thank you, General. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
And General, I might add that there are some of us who predicted exactly the scenario that has taken place
Yes, sir.
as the previous president withdrew our forces to levels that put the remaining troops' lives in danger, and were doomed to failure because of everything ranging from incredible rules of engagement that required a National Security Council approval to repel an attack, to the unilateral and unnecessary and unwarranted reduction of forces, which led us to the position we're in today, which was predicted by many of us who know something about warfare. Senator Cotton.
General, welcome back.
Thank you, Senator.
You obviously have heard some skepticism from this committee today, as you have in the past, about the ongoing mission in Afghanistan. We have accomplished a lot of things there that benefit the Afghan people. You know, they're safer. They have more GDP per capita. They have better education, especially for girls. Those are all great things. We have to worry more, though, about the safety and the prosperity and the education of the American people. So could you just tell us in plain language, you know, what are the American people, what are working folks out in Arkansas getting from more than 15 years of our presence in Afghanistan?
Yes, Senator, thank you for that question and for your support and your service in Afghanistan. Our number one goal is to protect the homeland from any attack emanating from the region. And of course, we have achieved that in the last 15 years. However, we need to stay on top of it because of this confluence of 20 terrorist groups in the region. I believe this is an enduring commitment to keep pressure on these groups and help the Afghans move towards a successful end state. What would that look like? Success might be the maintenance of this enduring counterterrorism effort to keep pressure on these groups. It means that we would destroy Islamic State and Al-Qaeda inside Afghanistan, which is something which we're actively pursuing every day. It means that we would help the Afghan security forces and government to extend their control to a larger and larger percentage of the population. It means that we would help Afghanistan to become ideally a place where reconciliation is achieved with the belligerents, and then they can become a more stable and prosperous entity in a critical part of the world. I recognize the distance of Afghanistan and the length of this has been challenging for the American people to support. However, I personally believe that this effort that we're undertaking there is protecting the homeland and preventing these terrorists from bringing their fight to our doorstep.
If the United States just said, we've had enough, 15 years is long enough, let's just roll up our operation there and come home, do you think that we would face the risk of an attack planned and directed from Afghanistan?
Yes, Senator, definitely.
That's a pretty big success then in our 15 years of operations there.
Yes, Senator.
A year ago, your predecessor, General Campbell, testified about his concern of the role Iran was playing in Afghanistan. Could you give us your view of what Iran has been up to in the last year since he testified?
Iran is directly supporting the Taliban in western Afghanistan. There's a complex relationship between Afghanistan and Iran, and it not only involves security matters like this. Iran is also recruiting Afghan Shia to fight against Islamic State in Syria and Iraq. On the other hand, there are also areas of cooperation between Iran and Afghanistan. Number one would be economic cooperation. The governments of India, Iran, and Afghanistan signed an agreement over the Charbahar port in southern Afghanistan. Actually, this initiative would be very beneficial to Afghanistan in terms of economic development. There's also ongoing conversations about water treaties between Afghanistan and Iran. Iran needs Afghanistan's water. So it's a complex relationship. It has areas of potential synergy and benefit for both parties, but it also has important security equities. And so the Afghan government is raising these issues with the government of Iran and asking them not to support the Taliban and undermine the Afghan government.
Is Iran's support for the Taliban primarily or exclusively located in Herat and Farah, or are they supporting the Taliban throughout the country?
Without getting into a lot of classified material in an open hearing like this, Senator, I'd say it's primarily in the West, but their financial inroads go around the country in the north and in Kabul in particular.
So Iran, which is a Shiite-led government, is supporting a Sunni-led movement, the Taliban in Afghanistan, but recruiting Shia from Afghanistan to travel to Syria and fight. Seems like a complex act from Tehran, united by a single consideration, which is undermining U.S. interests.
Yes, Senator, I'd agree with that. I think a number of, when we look at Russia and Iranian actions in Afghanistan, I believe that in part they are to undermine the United States and NATO and prevent our this strong partnership that we have with the Afghans in the region. But it is complex, as you point out. They are recruiting Shia. The Afghans are concerned about these Shia fighters returning to Afghanistan at some point, and what will they become a destabilizing factor or not? And this is of great concern to the Afghan government.
Thank you, General. Be safe downrange. Say hi to the troops. We support.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to continue this discussion about ISIL specifically. The Afghan Interior Ministry in early January said that the Islamic State Khorasan was now active in at least 11 of the county's 34 districts. And we've seen reports that Russia, China, and Pakistan recently met in Moscow to discuss the growing influence of ISIL in Afghanistan and the deteriorating security situation there. What's your understanding of the size and lethality of ISIL's presence in Afghanistan, and what, if any, was the U.S. government's role in the Russia meeting? And what counter-ISIL coordination have you seen between the Afghan government and its regional counterparts to date?
Thank you, Senator. There's no U.S. role in the Russia dialogue, as far as I understand, with respect to ISIL. This was a conference where they invited China, Pakistan, and now other regional countries. And I believe for the next meeting, they have extended an invitation to Afghanistan. So back to ISIL. So we saw Islamic State Khorasan province was formed of existing fighters from existing groups in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Primarily, their membership has come from the Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP, which is a Pakistan-based opponent of the Pakistan regime, from the Oryx-I agency. These fighters en masse joined ISIL-K and formed the initial group of fighters who then moved into Afghanistan, into Nangarhar province, and their spread was out to about 11 districts initially. They have had recruitment activities around the country, but they attempted to establish their form of the caliphate starting in Nangarhar province with Jalalabad as the capital. So this was their aspiration, but they failed to achieve it. When authorities were granted for the U.S. to begin striking Islamic State, since that time, we have worked closely with the Afghans, doing several deliberate operations against Islamic State in Afghanistan. During the time of my command, we've done 3 of these operations, and we have shrunk their geographic space from this larger 11 district number down to a smaller 3 to 4 districts in southern Nangarhar, but they are still there. And they have shown an ability to conduct suicide attacks inside Kabul and elsewhere around the country. So they have attacked Shia targets primarily. They attacked at a peaceful demonstration. They've attacked at Shia mosques. They've attacked on Shia religious holidays. So we see a definite ISIL-K Shia connection there. I would comment that this group is universally rejected by the Afghan people. These are primarily non-Afghans in this group. In addition to the TTP, we have members of the Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan. Are there some Afghans in there? Yes, but very few. And generally, I'd say they've been attracted by the money. ISIL pays their fighters more, and by the ideology and the effective information operation.
Which countries are they from?
They're from Pakistan and Uzbekistan. So the Islamic Movement Uzbekistan and from Pakistan.
And can you amplify a little more about the Pakistani-Afghan bilateral relationship and the Afghan government's ability to take control from the irreconcilable Taliban in parts of the country where they're dominant? And what's your assessment of Pakistan's commitment to deny sanctuary to Afghan Taliban?
Ma'am, this is a complex relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan. As President Ghani has
Welcome everyone, this is Golden State Times. My name is Jen, I am the host, And the swearing in is set to start in just a few minutes because President Trump, as of right now, is having lunch or breakfast, I don't know, with airline executives. So as soon as he's done with the airline executives, he will go into the Oval Office where Attorney General Jeff Sessions is set to be sworn in. So we will continue listening to the Senate, the hearing of military operations, until the swearing in comes live, and we'll take you guys there live from the White House. Thank you very much.
In terms of Taliban or Haqqani freedom of action to operate from sanctuaries in Pakistan.
And with my last few seconds, there was a report that the first female Afghan fighter pilot sought asylum in the U.S. last December. And so the question is, and her quotes were, things are not changing for the better in Afghanistan, things are getting worse. What is the status of women in Afghanistan today, and have the successes we've made been unwound?
I think we have made many successes with women in Afghanistan, ma'am. And let me expand the aperture beyond the services, although I'll come back to that. When the Taliban were there, only 1 million children were on school. That's expanded now to about 9 million children. 40% are women. You have women parliamentarians, women ministers, women governors, women members of the provincial councils. We have 3,000 women in the Ministry of Interior. We are making progress across the board on the role of women in society and throughout their military. This is a high priority for President Ghani and his wife. Mrs. Ghani, Her Excellency, and I chair a meeting on a quarterly basis called Women in Security, and all of the ministers come to this. My wife has attended this meeting. We work together on these issues frequently, and we appreciate the support from this committee and the Congress on funding women's initiatives. They've been very important going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. General Nicholson, thank you so much. It's great to see you back on American soil, and want to thank you for your continued service. But I also want to take the time to thank your family who is with you today as well for their support of you and for sharing you and your talents in a leadership capacity in a very difficult theater of operations. So thank you and your family very much. I'd like to pick up where we left off in Afghanistan when I visited a couple months ago. And you, better than most, understand, coming out of 2nd Ranger Battalion, you understand that General Creighton Abrams had directed the establishment of the 1st Ranger Battalion many years ago. And that is established in the Army, and he said that this unit was to be, and I'm going to quote him, an elite, light, and the most proficient infantry in the world, a battalion that can do things with its hands and weapons better than anyone. Wherever the battalion goes, it must be apparent that it is the best, end quote. And today the Army does continue with the Abrams Charter, and we send our Rangers into regular units all around the globe. And we know that this is for the betterment of those units and to boost their performance. We had a discussion about the Afghan regular forces and how they weren't performing maybe as they should be, but the Afghan Special Forces were performing quite well, but they were being overutilized. Do you think it's time that the Afghan Army introduce an Abrams Charter into its own forces and start sharing some of those talents with the regular units so that they can boost their performance as well?
Thank you very much, Senator, and I also want to thank you for your service in our Army and in Afghanistan, and thank you for the visit. And it was great that your unit that you commanded was in Afghanistan at the time you visited, and they deeply appreciated your visit.
Thank you.
I also appreciate very much your sentiments for my family. Thank you. I'll pass that on to everyone. And with respect to the Ranger Regiment, I think the reason I was smiling is you're hitting on an exact theme that we're working with the Afghans. First, I want to acknowledge the great contributions that the 75th Ranger Regiment are making to our campaign in Afghanistan and have done for years. In fact, my personal security officer, Master Sergeant Joe Lockton, is a member of the 75th Ranger Regiment. And as an example, he has 15 deployments to Afghanistan, 15 deployments to Afghanistan. And the Rangers are key in our counterterrorism mission in Afghanistan going forward. You're exactly right about the Abrams Charter. And in fact, in working with with President Ghani, we have worked closely on how to leverage the excellence that we have seen in the Afghan security forces, Afghan special forces, and leverage that for the good of the rest of the Army. So one of the hallmarks of the 4-year roadmap, which we are working together on, is to increase the size of the Afghan special forces because these units have proven so effective on the battlefield. So we can't produce these units overnight. As you well know, ma'am, it takes years to grow a special operations soldier, a ranger, a commando. So we are embarked upon a plan where they are recruiting more commandos now, and we are expanding those units one company at a time so that in the 4 years we've gained by the Warsaw Summit, we will almost double the number of special forces units. When we couple that with the Air Force capability, this gives an offensive punch to the Afghan security forces that the enemy will not be able to stand up to. So the nucleus of special forces will provide the offensive capability to the Afghan army to enable it to expand, to break the stalemate and expand their control over the country.
Very good. I'm glad to hear that. In the spring, 300 Marines are set to deploy to the Helmand province.
Yes, ma'am.
And that is quite a historic and a symbolic place for our Marines. And as you know, some estimates project 80% of Helmand province is now controlled by the Taliban, a province that supplies the Taliban with approximately 60% of their funding. And it's my understanding that the Marines are replacing an equally sized Army unit that is currently deployed in the region. The chairman stated something about, we're not really trying to win, we're just trying not to lose. Do you see this as moving the ball forward in the ability to help the Afghans, or are we going to continue to see losses in Helmand?
Ma'am, first off, to echo the conversation I had earlier with the chairman, we want to succeed in Afghanistan. We believe that success in Afghanistan is critical to the United States, to our NATO alliance, and of course to the Afghan people. Helmand, as you pointed out, is important to the Taliban because as a narco-insurgency, this is where they get their money. And the principal poppy-producing provinces in Afghanistan are Helmand, Kandahar, and to the west, increasingly, Farah province. And we've seen a move by the Taliban to try to gain ground in Farah because of this. So the advisory effort at the end of 2014, as we drew down our presence, we shrunk our advisory effort in Helmand and other places around the country quite significantly. So in the last year, it became apparent that we needed to, instead of advising on an ad hoc basis, we needed to go in there with a permanent structure, really purpose-built to advise. And so when we reached this conclusion, I reached out to the Commandant, General Neller, to request his assistance with this because the Marine Corps has deep experience in Helmand. They have a lot of skin in the game. They did a great job down there. We wanted to see if the Marine Corps could come back and help us with this critical area that has been so important in their impressive legacy. So we're very grateful that the Marines have stepped up to assist in Helmand, and we look forward to getting the team over there. They'll be arriving this spring, and when they come in, they'll have a more structured advisory effort than we've had up to this point. We have suffered casualties in Helmand in our advising capacity this year, sadly. And this was in our Special Forces units who are accompanying Afghan commandos on missions in Helmand. But overall, we're going to work hard to keep those potential for casualties to an absolute minimum. Sadly, there's been some recent fighting in Sangin, and we had another American Special Forces soldier severely wounded in Sangin this morning just before I walked into the hearing. So this just highlights the criticality of this region and the need to keep focused on the Afghan success down there. The final piece I'd add is that the 215th Corps, which is the Corps in Sangin, after the tough fight in 2015, we did a significant regeneration effort on the 215th Corps. And again, we are embarked upon a significant regeneration effort now because that is where the Afghans are suffering very high casualties. We put in a new commander. His name is General Ahmadzai. He's been doing a great job with the unit down there, but they do need our help with regeneration and building. We have a great governor down there, Governor Hyatt, who's doing a very good job. But we have experienced problems with police corruption to a significant extent, which are undermining our efforts. So this is an area in relation to some of the earlier questions I answered on corruption and ghost soldiers in particular that we're very focused on is Helmand. So it's a comprehensive effort to try and get Helmand back on track, and the Marines are going to play a key role in it.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let me just be sure. Right now, you say at the beginning that we're at a stalemate. Do you believe we are developing a strategy to break that stalemate?
Yes, Senator.
Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to move to a sort of higher strategic level. The original justification, and the one that you have emphasized today, is the sanctuary argument, that we have to go after and stabilize Afghanistan so that it cannot be again used as a sanctuary for terrorist attacks on the homeland. My concern about that strategy is that if it's not Afghanistan, it could be somewhere else. That's a strategy that could justify significant investment and occupation, if you will, and I don't use that in a military term, but presence in, Libya, Iraq, Syria, Mali, eastern Pakistan. Where does it stop? In other words, our original mission was Al-Qaeda. We were very successful. Al-Qaeda was broken up, but it's moved to other places. Now we're in the business of keeping Afghanistan afloat from an enemy, from the Taliban and all these other groups. Help me out with where you draw the lines on this sanctuary strategy, which could be anywhere in the world.
Yes, Senator, and thank you for that question. And this is I think there are some aspects that are unique to Afghanistan that don't apply elsewhere in the world. Number one would be the number of terrorist groups. So again, the U.S. has designated 98 groups globally, 20 are in Afghanistan and Pakistan. So this is the highest concentration anywhere in the world. So this policy of creating an enduring counterterrorism platform applies to this region in a way that it would not into some of the other areas that you mentioned that don't have this high concentration of terrorists. I would suggest that some of these other areas could be handled by our global counterterrorism strategy. And I don't want to speak for General Thomas, the Special Operations Commander, or the Chairman or the Joint Staff. I know they're working on this, but this is, we think because of the high concentration of terrorist groups in this region, that it would necessitate an enduring counterterrorism platform. The conditions in this region also lend themselves to the growth of these organizations. These 20 groups sit on top of a population between Afghanistan and Pakistan of over 200 million people. 70% of them are under the age of 30. Employment is low. There's radical forms of Islam.
Fertile ground.
And so it's like a petri dish, if you will, into which you drop the 20 strands of DNA of these terrorist groups. And then what we see happening is convergence and growth and connections develop between
But you understand the concern.
Yes, sir.
And I think you've articulated why Afghanistan. Let me change the subject somewhat. As I understand, opium production is up.
Yes, sir.
The fields are up. I would argue that we're being invaded every day. We're losing 4 people an hour in this country to overdose deaths. Heroin, opium, grown in places like Afghanistan. If the fields in Afghanistan were terrorist camps, killing 4 people an hour in the United States, they'd be gone. They would be long gone. Why don't we take that out? Why doesn't air power just eliminate that source of this scourge in our country?
Yes, sir. The counter-narcotics policy is not the purview of the Defense Department. I don't want to get in front of those agencies or the administrations that consider this, but you have highlighted an area that's extremely important to the outcome in Afghanistan. And Senator,
I don't want to make Afghanistan safe for shipping heroin to the United States.
Yes, sir. Senator, I agree with you and support that. This is a topic that we have raised with our chain of command, and it needs to be a part of, I believe, the policy consideration on the way forward in Afghanistan.
And I think President Ghani has to understand that part of our support rests upon the control of that industry, which is destructive around the world, but especially destructive in this country. Finally, you mentioned several times Pakistan. We're never going to win this fight as long as Pakistan is acting as a sanctuary, resupply base, all of those things. What can we do to get Pakistan off the dime on these issues? They were good in Waziristan, but as you pointed out, there are plenty of areas they've left untouched. What do we have to do? Cut off funding, have a summit or something, because we're doing all of this work in Afghanistan, which will never achieve final success or thorough success as long as Pakistan is sitting there enabling a lot of this activity.
Senator, I agree with you. We need to do a holistic review of our Pakistan policy and sit down with Pakistan leaders. And of course, we have an opportunity for such a review given the new administration and the new chain of command. And we have many areas where we could be working together in our mutual benefit. And I think this is key to the future. I know I'm personally committed to this and working with my Pakistani counterparts. I know that President Ghani wants to work with Pakistan towards a peaceful resolution. And in my initial conversations with my chain of command, this is a high priority for all of us.
Well, Pakistan is a substantial recipient of U.S.
Yes, sir.
foreign aid, and it seems to me there ought to be some connections drawn because they're endangering American lives and the viability of the country of Afghanistan. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, General, and I really appreciate our time this week. Let me ask you a couple of questions. Is Osama bin Laden walking the face of the earth today?
I'm sorry?
Is Osama bin Laden walking the face of the earth today?
No, sir, he's not.
Have thousands of al-Qaeda fighters been taken out of the fight?
Yes, sir.
Has al-Qaeda mounted a major attack on the homeland here in the United States?
No, sir.
Will you go home and remind your troops that those facts are not lost on us here in Washington?
Thank you.
That's very important to us, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question about Russia. I'm very concerned that it's confusing, and what we saw them do in Syria, and it's not lost on us here, that they have now established, it seems like, permanent presence there in Tartus and Latakia that make something that we don't have in the area, makes them positioned to do very nefarious things in that area going forward. I'm very concerned that in Afghanistan now, after years of being out, they're back in there. And I'm concerned that it looks like, sir, in the north and northeast of Afghanistan, is Russia it seems like Russia is coordinating with and helping ISIS in the north and northeast. Is that a fact, sir?
Sir, we don't have that information. We know they're overtly legitimizing the Taliban, and we have reports of support to the Taliban. But anything more than that, sir, I'd ask to discuss in another forum.
You spoke in, I think, well, it was recently in December, I think, you said that you condemned the malign influence.
Hello, folks. Welcome and good morning. President Trump, if you just joined us, President Trump is right now, he's in a meeting with airline executives. So that's why the swearing in of Attorney General Jeff Sessions is being delayed just a little while. As soon as President Trump is done with the airline executives, he will go back into the Oval Office and Jeff Sessions will be sworn in. So make sure to stay here with us in Golden State Times. And as soon as it goes on live, we'll head to Washington, D.C. and bring it to you here. So enjoy the chat. And the hearing for military operations is going on right now. So like I said, once it goes live, we will go there. Thank you very much.
800 mission. I mean, it's been a significant effort. And the system that does this, though, is more than pilots and aircraft. It also involves the Afghan tactical air controllers on the ground and the Afghan maintainers back at the base. So we have seen progress in all these areas. In fact, it's been very impressive for such a young capability.
Speaking of that, you talked about training and advising below the corps level earlier. And two areas that you've said that you're doing that in is aviation and special forces. You've already talked to the special forces. In Helmand Province, I think you learned when you were down there helping to rebuild the 215th Corps. Is that one of the things that you came back with and learned, your forces came back and learned from that you have to be at the below the Corps level in aviation training and assisting?
Absolutely, sir. So the authorities I was granted in June to use combat enablers in support of Afghans necessitate that I be able to push advisors below the Corps level if we are to accurately provide and effectively provide, and in a way that avoids civilian casualties, the use of these assets below the Corps level.
Sir, in closing, I'm about out of time, but what are the 3 to 5 things you would advise this new president to consider that you need to be successful against the counterterrorism fight that you have, defeating al-Qaeda, and finding some solution with the Taliban in Afghanistan?
Sir, thank you. Well, first, the viability of an enduring counterterrorism platform in Afghanistan is critically important to our national security and preventing an attack on the homeland. There are some objectives that we would seek going forward: the destruction of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, the destruction of Islamic State in Afghanistan, helping the Afghans to extend their control over the population to at least 80% of the population going forward, working closely with the Pakistanis to eliminate or reduce sanctuary for the Taliban, Haqqani, and other groups inside Pakistan, and then working with the Afghans and the international community for an Afghan-led peace and reconciliation process. I think if we can get these elements into our plan going forward, and indeed we're working on that, then we can bring this fight to a successful conclusion going forward that enables us to continue our CT efforts, but in an environment of a prosperous, stable Afghanistan.
Sir, thank you for professionalism and for your leadership over there. I look to see you there soon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, General, and thank you, your family, and most importantly, please tell all the men and women that you lead how much we respect the choices they have made to protect our country. I'm going to be a broken record again and get to contracting. I've had a chance to review the cigar report that just came out, and even though we have made progress, and I will acknowledge we have made some progress, there are still some problems that I think we've got to talk about. And we're talking about $100 billion to contractors in Afghanistan in the last 8 years. I mean, this is real money. This is a significant amount of taxpayer resources that are going to contractors. The report cites problems that are cited over and over and over again. I think one of those problems, though, we have corrected, and I want to make sure on the record that you can confirm that. I put in the NDAA last year a provision that you cannot spend money building anything in areas of the country where we cannot get oversight personnel there to check, to see the progress, and to make sure the money is not walking away. In fact, are you confident now that there is no project that is ongoing with contractor money right now in Afghanistan paid for by U.S. dollars where our oversight personnel, our civilian oversight personnel, cannot get to it to look at it?
I believe so, ma'am, but I'd like to take that one for the record and go back and verify that and give you a more thorough answer.
That would be terrific, because what we learned is that there were areas that we were paying contractors, many of which were local contractors, in areas that we couldn't get to because of security concerns, and that's where the money was disappearing. And things were not getting built.
Yes, ma'am.
And money was being wasted. 17 of the 45 construction projects that have been inspected since 2009 did not meet contract requirements and specifications. And apparently the DOD has acknowledged that in many instances that the U.S. forces lack the capacity to administer, oversee, and close contracts to ensure proper performance. I know you're being asked to do a lot, and I know it's hard, but do you think you have adequate forces to do the oversight necessary on this contract work that is so incredibly expensive?
Ma'am, the limitation on forces limits our ability to do oversight. There's no question about it. In fact, we're in a situation where we have to substitute contractors for service members to do functions that normally service members would do. So I offered a couple of examples earlier. For example, on aviation maintenance, we bring in contract mechanics to maintain our helicopters because we leave their mechanics back in the States because of force manning limitations. Now, I acknowledge I have authority to move these forces around, but the overall limitation puts us in a situation where we try to optimize having uniformed service members doing only things that they can do and substituting contractors wherever possible so that we can maximize our advisory effort. But we have gotten to a point now where I think I from a commander standpoint, would rather see soldiers doing what soldiers are trained to do and then not spend the money on contractors, which is inevitably more expensive.
Inevitably.
Yes,
and it's one of those things that we do this a lot in government under the guise of, saying, well, we're going to limit how many employees we have or what our ground strength is. That doesn't change the requirements of a federal agency, and it certainly doesn't change the mission of our military.
Right.
So we just plus up contractors many times without adequate scoping, without adequate work on the contract, without oversight, paying contractors bonuses when they've done a terrible job. So I just didn't want to let this moment pass without telling you that there's somebody that's still paying really close attention on the contractor side, and I'll look forward to working with you on that. Corruption is a big part of this. Do you believe that we have made any progress overall in Afghanistan on the corruption front?
I think we've made some progress recently. President Ghani's very committed
I know
to
he
this.
did that agency, the government agency, right? The corruption, the development phase of the ACJC, the anti-corruption effort he's doing.
So, for example, the Anti-Corruption Justice Center you just mentioned, stood up by President Ghani and with support of the international community. We had our first trial of a two-star general in the Ministry of Interior. He was convicted to 14 years in jail for engagement in bribery concerning a fuel contract. We have pulled back fuel contracts under CSTICA instead of the ministries because of the corruption that was linked to them. We are going after the reduction of ghost soldiers.
Right.
And we are holding back the money in terms of pay accounts until they can verify they have the people. So these efforts alone, for example, fuel contracts total $200 million. By putting them under control of our contracting officials, we can reduce that space for corruption. Same with the pay.
That's great.
These are the two greatest areas. I should point out President Ghani initiated a body called the National Procurement Council, and he now, because of the corruption surrounding contracting, he personally oversees the awarding of the large government contracts in a committee that's transparent. We attend it, CGAR attends it, our own contracting officials attend it, and then they work through a very rigorous process to try and reduce the space for corruption in the contracting process. So, back to your original question, I do think under President Ghani's leadership, we have made progress. Are we finished? Absolutely not. We have a lot more work left to do.
Thank you. And for the record, if we could get the relative strength and numbers of the 20 different terrorist groups that you say are on the ground in Afghanistan, I think it'd be good for us to get in perspective where the numbers are and even any help that you can give us in a non-classified setting in terms of geographic location.
We've got
you.
that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. General Nicholson, thank you for your leadership and for your concise answers to tough questions. If this has been asked before, and you've answered it, just refer, and we'll go to the record rather than re-answering a question. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be here. I have 3 competing committee meetings right now. But with the authorization for the use of military force and the presidential policy guidelines, when I was in Afghanistan, it looked like there were some kinks at least 2 years ago in terms of you being able to take the fight to people that maybe should be targeted. Do you feel like we're getting to a point where you have all the authorizations, one, under presidential policy guidelines, which I assume are being modified as we speak or at least being assessed? And two, could you talk a little bit about the need to revisit authorization for the use of military force, particularly in the area that you're concerned with? What would be the benefit or the disadvantage?
Senator, right now, I feel I have the authorities necessary to strike in the areas where we need to. I do. This will be an issue we'll discuss with my chain of command going forward. And as we discussed earlier, we're engaged in those conversations right now about the AUMF and about the authorities going forward. So I would ask, sir, your indulgence to let those conversations play out. On the specific authorities, the ones I was granted in June, were instrumental to our success this year. And with those authorities, I can strike in the areas where we need to, when we need to. But if I could come back to you, Senator, in another forum on the specifics, I would request that.
Well, thank you. And I think that those were some authorities that we were talking about when we visited Afghanistan almost 2 years ago. Yes. So it's glad to see they finally come, long time coming. With respect to, you mentioned earlier the investment by other nations in the economic side and in the development side in Afghanistan. I know that about 2 years ago we were talking about a potential cliff that we were running over in 2017 because of funding just to get infrastructure in place, to get rid of corruption, to continue to build. Do you feel like we've overcome that threat and that we've got the adequate amount of non-military funding flowing in from our partner nations or the United States to keep the economic revival going?
Yes, Senator. This year we had the Brussels Donor Conference in October. And the Afghan government made a significant effort in engaging with all the donors. We had over 75 countries and organizations there, and they expressed an intent to commit $15.2 billion to Afghan's development needs. So this was a significant success story for Afghanistan. I think this built upon the success of the Warsaw Conference, a NATO summit, at which the alliance committed to 4 more years, and I believe that there was a connection between this, that the confidence demonstrated in the Afghan security forces at the Warsaw Summit to commit to 4 more years provided assurance to the donors that there would be a more secure environment going forward. Now, our job, of course, is to work with the Afghans to improve the security situation, break the stalemate, get to a place where they can apply these development dollars most effectively.
And just the questions, I think Senator McCaskill was running down. I'll go back and listen to the dialogue I got on the tail end. But in a yes-no way, are we on a positive path in terms of corruption and other sort of government agency issues in Afghanistan?
Positive, but a lot of work left to do, sir.
Exactly what he will do and do better than anybody else can. He's trained better for it than anybody else. The level of respect that he has throughout this country as a former prosecutor, not even to mention being a longtime U.S. Senator, is absolutely incredible. He will be a great protector of the people. I'm signing 3 executive actions today designed to restore safety in America. These executive actions continue to deliver on my campaign promises. First, I'm directing Department of Justice and Homeland Security to undertake all necessary and lawful action to break the back of the criminal cartels that have spread across our nation and are destroying the blood of our youth and other people, many other people. Secondly, I'm directing Department of Justice to form a task force on reducing violent crime in America. And thirdly, I'm directing the Department of Justice to implement a plan to stop crime and crimes of violence against law enforcement officers. It's a shame what's been happening to our great, truly great law enforcement officers. That's going to stop as of today. Today's ceremony should be seen as a clear message to the gang members and drug dealers terrorizing innocent people. Your day is over. A new era of justice begins, and it begins right now. I want to again thank and congratulate Mary and our new Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. I wish you God's wisdom and blessings in your journey. Mr. Vice President, would you please conduct the swearing in? Thank you. Thank you very much for being here, everyone.
My great privilege on behalf of the President of the United States to administer you the oath of office. Please place your left hand on the Bible. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Jeff Sessions, do solemnly swear
I, Jeff Sessions, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely,
that I take this obligation freely,
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties
of the office upon which I am about to enter.
of the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God. Bring that down a little bit. Mr. President, thank you for this great honor. It's something I never expected would happen in my life, but I do love the Department of Justice. I care about its traditions and its heritage. I had 15 years in that great department, and the honor to lead it now is something that I do not have words to express effectively. There are a lot of things we need to do. First, we need to value and support and encourage the fabulous people who work there. I've worked with them over the years. I know how good they are, and their talents need to be directed at this nation's benefit in a lot of different ways. We have a crime problem. I wish the rise that we're seeing in crime in America today were some sort of aberration or a blip. My best judgment, having been involved in criminal law enforcement for many years, is that this is a dangerous, permanent trend that places the health and safety of the American people at risk. We will deploy the talents and abilities of the Department of Justice in the most effective way possible to confront this rise in crime and to protect the people of our country. We have an increased threat since I was United States Attorney from terrorism, Mr. President. You've spoken firmly on that. You've led this nation to say we're going to respond effectively to the threat of terrorism, and you can count on your Department of Justice to do so in an effective way. And you've said something that I believe, and I think the American people believe, that we need a lawful system of immigration, one that serves the interests of the people of the United States. That's not wrong, that's not immoral, that's not indecent. We admit 1 million people a year plus who lawfully, and we need to end this lawlessness that threatens the public safety, pulls down wages of working Americans. It is an honor beyond words to serve under you and your leadership. You're putting together a great cabinet, which is just a thrill for me to have the opportunity to join, and I look forward to making sure that every ounce of strength I have and that the people of the Department of Justice have is going to be focused on preserving and protecting the Constitution and the safety of this country. We will defend the laws of this country is passed by Congress. And we'll defend the lawful orders of the President of the United States with vigor and determination. Thank you all for being here. I see a lot of good friends, and may God bless all our efforts. Thank you. Mr. President, these are proposed executive orders approved by the Department of Justice.
Enforcing federal law with respect to the transnational criminal organization and preventing international trafficking. Will be accepted. Thank you. Task Force on Crime Reduction and Public Safety. Preventing violence against federal, state, tribal, and local law enforcement officials. Very important. All very important. Thank you all very much. Jeff, I know you're going to do a fantastic job. Good luck.
Thank you very much, folks, for joining us and choosing us as your stream of choice. Please hit this this video with a thumbs up, and also let us know what you guys think in the comment section below or on the chat if you are watching this live. Let us know and show support to Attorney General Jeff Sessions by pressing 1. The executive orders that you saw that President Trump was signing is one, that it will criminalize 100% anybody that attacks the police. The second one was crime reduction and public safety. So I'm pretty sure he's trying to target cities like trying to reduce violence in cities like Chicago, Atlanta, and others, including Houston. Houston's really bad too. So those were all executive orders that he signed that were going to criminalize and reduce violence and violence against the police, and increasing the law that is already in the books. So yeah, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope that you guys enjoyed. If you did, please click that thumbs up and also subscribe to the channel if you are new. We hope that you guys join us later on today for the White House presser. It's set to begin in exactly 2 hours, a little bit less than 2 hours. So make sure that you guys join us. If you guys just subscribed or you just joined the community, we welcome you. Also, make sure to click the little bell so you can get the heads up on when we go live or we upload any videos. So make sure that you guys do that. Thank you very much. If you guys would like to help out the channel, there's a few links in the description below. We are selling a coffee mug to help continue operations, so go and check it out and order it if you're interested. Also, if you guys would like to help out by donating $1, whatever it is. There's also a link in the description below. Thank you very much. I hope to see you guys here next time. But until then, peace. And thank you to all the moderators that came out early this morning. We appreciate you. Thank you very much.